From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. I am Nick Beres. It is Thursday. Good show on tap. Thursday, not open phones today. Remember, we did that on Tuesday where we just opened it up to all of your phone calls, whatever you want to talk about. Today, we're going to be a little more specific. We're going to be talking about guns, not just in Tennessee, but the laws here and around the country, some of the recent incidents that we've had and how that plays into the whole debate over guns and gun rights. It always comes up. And of course, I'm referring to some very tragic situations, which we've talked about this week, what happened up in Virginia with the reporter and the photographer, another tragic incident in Houston where a sheriff's deputy was shot. You get into those types of cases and some of the laws that are on the books. I invite you to join in the conversation at 615-737-7587. And when we saw all this happening, we thought, who do we need to have on? Well, among others, the top of the list for me is John Harris with the Tennessee Firearms Association.
Good morning, Nick.
Good morning. It's good to have you on. And a lot to talk about this morning. We'll have the phone lines open. But let me ask you this. If you were going to tonight's Titans game, and I don't know if you are, I'm not, because I think preseason's awful. And it's crazy that they force ticket holders to buy those crap tickets for games that don't mean anything. But I don't want to stray. My question is, if you were going to the game tonight, and should you have chosen to on your own, would you bring a weapon with you? And if you did, would you feel as though you have a right to bring the weapon to the Titans game?
Those are two very good questions. The first question, would I take a gun, is my general personal philosophy is, you never, like a spare tire, you never know when you're going to need it.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be without it if you do. And so my general philosophy is you always want to carry a gun if you can do so legally.
Okay.
The second aspect is the problem is could I? You know, does the law prohibit it at this point? And the problem is it's a gray area the way the statutes have been written, and there's no good, clear answer, which is a fault I place fully at the feet of the General Assembly.
Okay, because the AG, I think, said with the existing law on the guns in parks and places like this that and maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but that under this law you could take the gun, but then it's been made very clear by those who manage, you know, the football field and some of these other arenas that no, guns will not be allowed in. If we find that you have a gun, we're not going to allow you in with the weapon. Right. Is there a little bit of, I guess you said it's a gray area. What's your take? I'm not sure.
Here's why, unfortunately, we have a gray area. And the reason is the part of the statute everybody needs to look at is Tennessee Code Annotated 3917-1311. And the first part of the statute, Section A, says you can't have firearms in these locations, and it's a list of things that reads like parks, civic centers, buildings, and other recreational facilities. Okay. Then in a later subsection further down, that what they passed this year, is an exception that says, however, permit holders can have their guns with them. The problem is they didn't use the same list of nouns. So the word civic center, for example, is missing. Other buildings is missing. And the list that they used in the General Assembly when they wrote this exception was parks, greenways, campgrounds, basically open areas.
Yeah.
And so now we have, for no good reason, a statute that has one list of nouns and an exception that has a different list of nouns. Yeah. And that's why there's the debate of, is the Titans facility, for example, is it a park? Is it a civic center? Right. Is it a recreational facility? And so
you're right, it's at the feet of the Assembly.
The General Assembly has done a great disservice to the people of the state of Tennessee.
By not being clear one way or the other, however you feel about the issue. So I wonder, though, if someone will try to test it.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder, will there be anyone that attends tonight's game that chooses? I guess you could bring it open or concealed, depending, right?
Yeah, Tennessee law allows open or concealed
I wonder if someone, will show up with a weapon tonight and their ticket and say, I want to come in, and then I assume they will not be allowed in, and if they object to it, will they sue? If they force the issue, which I hope they wouldn't, would they be arrested? What do you think?
Well, the dangerous component of this for the property owner, let's look at it from their perspective, which is the government. Okay, the government leases the space to a third party. The government can't lease or grant any rights greater than it has. So that the General Assembly has said you can't prohibit weapons in this area, if that's what the conclusion is, then the Titans cannot ban them if the government that leased it to them couldn't ban it.
Yeah.
And if they try to ban it, they face possibly civil rights violation claims. So they could potentially be sued.
It's so, you know, and it's now let me ask you this just on a practical side of things, John. And I know what you're saying about you never know if you need it until you need it, and so you want to have it with you. But as you and I just sit here, we're both pretty rational folks, and you know, do you really think, though, it would be a good idea to allow people to bring guns into, say, a Titan Stadium, especially when you consider the fact that, you know, it's packed with people. Okay, there's beer being served. Right. There are rival fans that sometimes, I sometimes have to sit there next to a Colts fan that keeps cheering while we're getting beat. It's driving me crazy. But, you know, not that I would ever pull a weapon, but it just is an environment that I'm not sure, and they have security there that I'm not sure is conducive. Not that I worry about someone like you or some of my other law-abiding friends, but someone else who is legally got a weapon, but's in there and is a big Titans fan, is drinking a bit, and the guy behind him drops a beer on his head, you know, when a touchdown's scored, and then they get into it, and then things escalate, and a shot's fired, and then not only is a shot fired at one person, but there's all these people else. To me, it just doesn't seem like, you know, a place where a gun should be because of the potential for what I just described.
You know, that's a fair concern.
I don't know.
But we have to look at the fact that when you look at data from TBI, the people in the state of Tennessee and generally across the country that have these gun permits are on average about 12 times less likely, that's based on Tennessee data, 12 times less likely than the average person to engage in any criminal conduct, period. Okay. And we have a statute that says if you're a permit holder and you have your handgun in your possession, you can't even consume alcohol, much less be under the influence.
Right. So, meaning that's right there. If you did get in and you had a gun, it would be illegal for you to have a beer.
Right.
Yeah.
And permit holders are taught when they go through the classes, you know, you're not a vigilante. This is only for imminent fear of death or serious bodily harm. And they're taught the consequences of resorting to the weapon unless that heightened level of danger exists. Yeah. So you really don't see, when you look at the fact we've had this history for 20 years, you don't see a problem really with the road rage and permit holders using the weapons rashly. So I don't think there's a big serious problem that if you allow permit holders in a stadium like that you're going to have them causing problems or resulting in heightened risk.
Let me ask you this, and we're going to get to the phone lines as always when we talk this topic. We get calls coming in. I want all of your opinions, and consider some of the questions I'm asking him now. You see the number on the screen. Of course, a few weeks back we had that incident at the theater in Antioch. Okay, correct. Turned out the individual had a pellet gun. Law enforcement certainly didn't know it, and I applaud the Metro Police for the way they handled it. He was shot and killed. You point a gun at a police officer and they tell you to drop it, I think you should pretty much expect to get shot.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, that's just the rule of thumb, I'm afraid, if you're going to do that. Now, since then, I think more theaters have come to the point where, you know, no weapons allowed, and it's to the point, I went to a movie just a few weeks back, and you get in there, and if you have a bag, I had a satchel because I'd been doing some shopping, they want to search that now. What's your thought on that? Again, they have a right, I suppose, as a private business to keep that out, but you know, some people called in the days after that saying, you know, Nick, if one of two of those, you know, theater goers that day had a gun when he came in, they wouldn't have had to run. Maybe it wouldn't have been as dangerous. They could have resolved it right there on the spot. And once again, I'm thinking to myself, if I'm in that theater and this happens and 3 other people pull guns on this guy and shots start firing, I'm not real thrilled about that. I'm just not. Same scenario as the Titan Stadium. I'm worried bullets are going to be flying. People that don't have the proper training, yes, they have a weapon, but they're not law enforcement. What do you think?
Well, when you look at the fact that we've got 50 states that are, you know, test pots for what's going to happen and what might happen, you know, you just don't see a great deal of frequency. Actually, you see a greater incidence of law enforcement accidentally shooting a civilian than you do with handgun permit holders. Okay. And nationwide, we've got a lot more permit holders than we do law enforcement. Right. So you get into the issue with the movie theaters, for example. You know, I think the biggest impact is probably going to be the people that sneak in food.
Yeah. You know what? You just read my mind. Because I do that all the time, and I was like, oh, he's going to look in my bag now. He's going to find my chicken wings. You know, you are exactly right.
Because the permit holders are just going to go to Redbox or somewhere or Netflix and avoid it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take a phone call or two before we go to the break. Lots more to talk about with John Harris. Let's go to Joe. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Joe.
Just a couple of questions. I'm still confused about where you can carry a gun into the Titan Stadium or not, but the bigger question I have is public transportation, like metro buses, the train. Is it legal to carry a weapon if you're a permit holder? And our General Assembly, you know, I feel sad that these idiots are running the Tennessee making these laws. Evidently, they're not reading them very close or can't know the difference between a park and a indoor stadium or whatever. But answer those questions if you would. I appreciate your expertise in all these laws.
All right. That's tough.
Joe asked a good question, and when you look at, and this is something that I do, you know, as an attorney, the full ambit of the gun laws in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. You get into an area where there are just too many legitimate questions about what you can and can't do, like Joe asking, can I carry on a bus or the train? Mm-hmm. Well, they're not off limits by statute. So if they're off limits at all, that's because of posting, because that's just the way the scheme is set up. But where we come back to on all of this, and it really resonates probably with most of the callers this morning, is our government, our Constitution requires that when a legislature passes a law or a regulation is created, that the law be written, particularly if it's a criminal law like these are, so that it's sufficiently clear that the average person, the average police officer, the average district attorney, judge, and juror can all agree on what the law prohibits or allows. That shouldn't be open to debate. Mm-hmm. The only question in the criminal case should be, did the person violate the standard? The problem we have with so many of these laws that we've seen passed, particularly in the last 5 years with the Tennessee General Assembly, is you violate that very first standard. The law is not written sufficiently clear so that people can even agree on what's allowable.
Do you think they intentionally do that so that the debate, they can't be pigeonholed on something? I mean, why on earth would you not come up with something clear-cut?
I don't think it's intentional. It may be that they're trying to dance the fine line of political correctness, or wanting to minimize the complaints from the public that's not really supportive of the Second Amendment in the first place.
That's what I was wondering.
And instead of doing a good job as a constitutional steward elected by the people to write sound laws, they're dancing around and they're writing confusing, conflicting, and inconsistent provisions.
Yeah, that doesn't help things. Listen, we need to take a break. This is John Harris, Tennessee Handgun Association. We'll be back with more of your calls. Greg, Paul, and others, stay where you are. We have some lines open, too. We'll get to you. We've got him until 9 o'clock, 737-7587. Can't go anywhere. Talking gun laws, some of these gun issues, obviously a very important issue here in the state of Tennessee in the Second Amendment. We'll be back with more right after this.